Welcome to this weekly English news bulletin on Ronahi. In the course of last week, the Syrian army has shelled the mainly Kurdish Sheikh Maqsoud neighborhood of Aleppo twice, killing 3 civilians and wounding dozens. On the other hand, the Islamic State of Iraq and the Sham have executed 4 Kurdish civilians in the Azaz town of Aleppo city.
In a statement released on Thursday, People Defense Unit's fighters has launched a retaliatory attack against the control point of the Syrian army. YPG remarked that the action has been carried out in retaliation for the Ba'ath regime's aerial attack against the Kurdish neighborhood in Aleppo on 18th of December. The helicopter attack in the region left 5 civilians, all from the same family, severely wounded. According to the YPG statement, 4 soldiers of the Syrian army were killed and many others were wounded in the YPG attack, which targeted a control point in Al-Awarid neighborhood of Aleppo. Noting that YPG fighters also burned down a military post of the regime forces. YPG vowed in its statement to continue to protect the people of the Kurdish neighborhoods of Aleppo. After the aerial attack of 18th of December, the Syrian army shelled Sheikh Maqsoud again on 20th of December, killing 3 civilians and wounding others. In Azaz town of Aleppo city, Kurds have also been targeted. The Islamic State of Iraq and the Sham have executed in the town 4 Kurdish civilians. One of the civilians have been identified as Abdel Qadir Hosho, while the names of the 3 others remain unknown.
In a briefing published on 19th of December, Amnesty International described serious abuses of human rights committed in detention facilities run by the Islamic State of Iraq and the Sham, including some that amount to war crimes. In this regard, Amnesty International called on the Turkish government to prevent its territory being used by the Islamic State of Iraq and the Sham.
Torture, flogging and summary killings are rife in secret prisons run by the Islamic State in Iraq and the Sham, an armed group that controls large areas of northern Syria, said Amnesty International in a briefing published on 19th of December. The Islamic State, which claims to apply strict Sharia Islamic law in areas it controls, has ruthlessly flouted the rights of local people. In the 18-page briefing, Rule of Fear, the Islamic State abuses in detention in northern Syria, Amnesty International identifies 7 detention facilities that the Islamic State uses in Raqqa and Aleppo. Those abducted and detained by the Islamic State include children as young as 8, who are held together with adults in the same cruel and inhuman conditions, said Philip Luther, Amnesty International's director for the Middle East and North Africa. Several children were among detainees who received severe floggings, according to testimonies obtained by Amnesty International. In the briefing published, Amnesty International called on the Islamic State to end its appalling treatment of detainees and for the group leaders to instruct their forces to respect human rights. In addition, Amnesty International called on the international community to take concrete steps to block the flow of arms and other support to the Islamic State and other armed groups implicated in committing war crimes. The Turkish government in particular should prevent its territory being used by the Islamic State to bring in arms and recruits to Syria, said Philip Luther.
People's Council of West Kurdistan and the Kurdish National Council agreed to form a united Kurdish delegation which will represent the Kurds of Rojava and Geneva Conference. After gaining this agreement, the Kurdish officials will seek approval from the United Nations, United States of America and Russia to send a separate delegation to Switzerland.
Kurds of Rojava are demanding their own delegation separate from both the government and opposition at next month's peace talks in Switzerland aimed at halting the conflict in Syria. The co-chair of People's Council of West Kurdistan, Abdeslam Ahmed, spoke in this regard to Reuters and said, "The coalition are no different from Assad's Ba'ath Party rule when it comes to their position on the Kurds. They do not recognize the rights of Kurds to live on their land with recognition of their basic rights, including the right to administer their own region." The co-chair of People's Council of West Kurdistan, Abdeslam Ahmed, added, Kurdish leaders would put their case to Al-Akhdar al-Brahimi, the international envoy on Syria. but would also seek to convince the United States and Gulf Arab countries, which have backed the rebel fight against Assad. Russia is willing to accept the third bloc for the Kurds, but it is other powers, mainly the United States, which insist on a two-party negotiation, Ahmed said. If they insist on a single umbrella opposition group, we will go with the opposition as part of a unified Kurdish legal council, but we strongly believe in the principle that the Kurds deserve their own representation. Abdel Hamid Darwish, head of the Democratic Progressive Party, spoke also to Reuters and said, "We have agreed to a shared delegation made up of the main Kurdish parties. We will now talk to foreign powers and the United Nations to see if they will accept the Kurdish delegation." The Kurdish demand could complicate preparations for the long-delayed peace conference due to open on January 22nd. Al-Akhdar Ibrahimi, the international envoy on Syria, has set a December 27th as a deadline for delegations to be named.
A Kurdish delegation headed by PYD's co-chair Saleh Muslim visited Russia on invitation of the Russian Foreign Ministry. The Kurdish delegation made a series of meetings with the Russian officials and with the Kurdish community.
The Kurdish delegation, composed of PYD's co-chair Saleh Muslim, PYD's European representative Abdeslam Ahmed, and PYD's representative in France Khaled Issa, met on Monday 16th of December with the Russian presidential envoy to the Middle East and Deputy Foreign Minister Mikhail Bogdanov. The delegation headed by Saleh Muslim discussed with Bogdanov the developments of the situation in Syria and around and the preparation for the International Peace Conference Geneva II. Moreover, PYD's co-chair Saleh Muslim and PYD's representative in France Khaled Issa addressed the Russian Parliament Duma and discussed the latest developments in Rojava and the Geneva Conference. The Kurdish delegation also met with the Metropolitan Hilarion of Volkolansk and chairman of Moscow Patriarchate's Department of External Church Relations. The Metropolitan expressed his hope for a peaceful solution to the crisis in Syria and revealed their donation of $1 million to help Syrians suffering from the conflict. He also emphasized the need to continue and develop the Kurdish-Russian relations. In his turn, PYD's co-chair Saleh Muslim confirmed the efforts made in order to create a climate of respect and security for all ethnic and religious groups in the region. Furthermore, Muslim explained during the meeting the importance of the system of the democratic autonomy for the people of Rojava. He also drew the attention to the efforts going on to include different parts of the society in the democratic autonomous administration of Rojava. The Kurdish delegation visiting Russia held also a series of meetings with the Russian Kurdish community. PYD's representative in France stated in the meetings with the Kurdish community in Moscow that Russian officials confirmed to them that Saudi Arabia, Turkey and United States of America did not want the Kurdish question to be discussed at Geneva Conference.
The UN Food Programme, the United Nations Refugee Agency and UNICEF have started airlifting urgently needed humanitarian aid from Hawler, southern Kurdistan to Qamishlo Rojava on 15th of December.
After being delayed for several days due to bad weather conditions, the world's largest humanitarian agency flight landed on 15th of December in Qamishlo Airport from Hawler, southern Kurdistan, with almost 40 metric tons of food including wheat flour, pasta, oil, sugar, salt, rice and canned beans.
It's been a particularly harsh winter in Syria. It was decided a week or two ago that we should do whatever we could to provide material assistance to the refugees and displaced people in the region. And since the situation in Syria doesn't permit us to travel freely, it was decided that we would fly non-food items, core relief items we call them, to the beneficiaries in Syria, all of Syria. We're starting with a town called Qamishli, which is in the north. And we're targeting 10,000 households with these core relief items, which include plastic tarpaulins, kitchen sets. There are also blankets. There are collapsible water jerry cans and family hygiene kits.
According to the agency, over the next few days, the agency plans to use 11 more airlifts to move enough food to feed over 30,000 people for 1 month. 2 planes are contracted to do 23 rotations over the coming days between southern Kurdistan and Rojava. The UN Refugee Agency plans to send some 300 metric tons of urgently needed relief items to Qamishlo on 12 flights from its regional stockpile in Hawler. United Nations aid is intended to help some 60,000 displaced people and includes 50,000 blankets, 10,000 kitchen sets, 10,000 plastic sheets, 10,000 jerry cans, 30,000 sleeping mats, and 10,000 hygiene kits, among other supplies. The number of vulnerable people in Jizir region of Rojava is estimated at 50,000 to 60,000, said Amir Awad, UN Director for Middle East and North Africa. Jizir region has been out of reach for a long time, but this massive airlift will ensure that many thousands of needy Syrians receive the winter aid they require.
The Rojava Center for Strategic Studies conducted a survey on the Democratic Autonomous Administration of Rojava, which was announced on 12th of November. That survey was conducted in Jizir region of Rojava and aimed to find out the thoughts on the Rojava administration.
The Rojava Center for Strategic Studies in Qamishlo City conducted a survey on the Democratic Autonomous Administration of Rojava, announced on 12th of November. 690 citizens of Rojava Jizir region, aged 18 and older, were interviewed in the survey. From the 690 respondents, 73.5% were male, while 26.5% were female. The citizens involved in the survey were from different components of Rojava: Kurds, Arabs, and Christians. 3.2% from the respondents were Syriacs, 7.3% were Arabs, while the majority of 88.7% were Kurds. To the question to what extent the administration is understood, 60% of the respondents confirmed that they understand the Rojava administration well. 32% said they understand it sufficient, while 7% of the respondents did not understand it yet. The reflection of the Rojava society in the administration has also been asked. About 76% pointed out that the representation of Rojava's components in the administration is fair, while 18.4% said it's unfair. Moreover, according to the survey, 75.6% of the respondents thinks that the administration will succeed if it's managed by political parties and movements. And about obstacles facing the administration, 30.2% of the respondents think that the regional countries could obstruct the Rojava administration, while 27.8% said that internal disputes could play a role in obstructing the administration. At the end of the survey, respondents answered the question if Rojava administration will succeed or fail. 83.8% were convinced that the Rojava administration will succeed, while 11.8% were pessimistic and said that the administration will fail.
Mrs. Lucina Kathman, International Vice President of International PEN, which is the largest worldwide writers association, was also one of the supporters of the Autonomous Administration of Rojava. Mrs. Lucina Kathman is now live with us from Mexico. We are very pleased, Mrs. Kathman, to have you on Ronahi. After the announcement of the Autonomous Administration of Rojava, you wrote an open letter to President Obama, the Congress and the people of United States of America, explaining why they should welcome the Kurdish autonomous region in Syria. What are the reasons of your support for the Autonomous Administration of Rojava, Mrs. Kathman?
I'm coming at the issue from the cultural side. You know, I have been a friend of the Kurdish PEN Center for many, many years, and I've been able to see that the Kurdish people are culturally one. And this is a very strong element. You know, there's really nothing, there's no one has ever been able to really change that. And it seems to me that they need to have the opportunity for the culture to develop freely. And so most of what I have been taking stands on, talking about, is about letting the Kurdish culture flourish. My point of view is not really political. However, of course, it's where the Kurdish people are administering their own culture, it flourishes much, much more. In the other area, it tends to be suppressed and forbidden and illegal. And so, of course, I don't care how things work out, but I'd like to see the Kurdish people free and able to develop in the normal way that we want peaceful development. That is, with representation for minorities, with participation of women, with religious freedom. But in fact, the Kurdish people are doing a pretty good job of that in Kurdistan of Iraq.
Kurds of Rojava, Mrs. Kathman, are demanding their own delegation separate from both the government and opposition at next month's peace talks in Switzerland. This demand fits into the Kurdish strategy of being neutral, not supporting the regime, neither the opposition. To what extent were the Kurds right in this strategy, in your opinion?
Of course, it's not right for me to say whether the Kurds are right or wrong, but it does seem logical that since the Kurdish people have really not taken sides in this very, very serious and painful situation in Syria, and they're a large group, well, if they're going to try to represent the situation in Syria, well, what the somehow or other represented, and that certainly includes the Kurdish people in the entire West Kurdistan area.
It has been known from several sources that the United States and its allies in the region are opposing the attendance of a separate Kurdish delegation in Geneva conference. Why do you think that the US is taking this stance, Mrs. Kathman?
Well, I don't actually know. I'm not really, but I can suspect that because they're politicians, they're subject to pressures, maybe from Turkey, maybe from other powerful nations, Iran, I don't know. And they're not visionaries, they're politicians. That means they respond to pressures. And that means that our work is just starting. We need to pressure. I hope that this will be successful, but I hope that everything involved in making the world better for the Kurdish people will succeed. And it's a question of doing the work, that is finding our allies, keeping after everyone, making sure they understand. Because as it is, most of the world does not know about Kurdistan. Most of the world doesn't know who the Kurdish people are. They're the largest stateless people. And they're very numerous, and people should know about them. But the work of publicity and pressure is essential for this. I do not know at any one minute what one politician is responding to or another is responding to. I don't think we need to know. I think we need to push and talk about the very things that I certainly hear about the importance of self-rule, or at least enough self-rule that there isn't this repression that is so frequent.
Despite all the challenges and opposition, Kurds in Rojava are continuing to consolidate their military and political gains. Could this fact pressure the regional and international powers to solve the Kurdish issue, Mrs. Kathman?
Well, the simplest answer is yes. My interest is in nonviolent action, and so I will not take a position on military gains, but I certainly do understand why Kurdish, and particularly Kurdish women, would take up arms to try to protect their homes from the forces of al-Nusra. I mean, I just couldn't possibly see that as the level of bad that it is when an invading army takes over somewhere.
The Kurdish freedom struggle in Kurdistan and in Rojava in particular needs the support of intellectual people like you, Mrs. Kathman. Do you have any plans to reinforce your support for Rojava?
I was challenged by this question of yours, I have to tell you. Yesterday I said to myself, why not? Because that's what we all need to be saying to each other every day. And I thought to myself yesterday, oh, there are some good politicians in the United States. Are they familiar with this issue? And I sent my letter to 3 of those. Now, that's one day's work. But I think that we're talking about many days' work by many people. And but I do understand that I'm being challenged to make more noise, and I think that's completely right, because I have been a friend of the Kurdish people for many years. I've been to Kurdistan one part or another, but I look at it as quite similar. I mean, we've got the same, you know, they all know the story of Memusin, they all know, you know, we all know in all these parts, they're the same cultural icon, stories that children are told. So I just see it all as part of the same movement from the inside, from learning these songs and dances myself. And so I do understand that those of us who do already understand have got a special mission to move with this, to keep noise. Now, every once in a while I get my own mission because they say I'm sticking my nose into politics. But I don't know if I am really, because I don't care about the politics. I care about the development of the Kurdish culture. And that's where I'm at on that. And if I need to help more because they have been so great to me, my Kurdish friends, well, then I need to help more. I need to think of 3 more politicians to send my letter to.
Mrs. Lucina Kathman, International Vice President of International PEN, you've been with us from Mexico. Thank you very much for speaking to Ronahi.
Thank you. It has been really a pleasure.
Thank you very much. Antoine Comité, the lawyer representing the families of the 3 Kurdish women murdered in Paris on 9th of January this year, has told Farad News Agency that there has been great progress in the investigation going on and the developments point to Turkish involvement. On the 9th of January 2013, 3 Kurdish female activists, the founder member of the Kurdistan Workers' Party Sakina Janses, Kurdistan National Congress Paris representative Fidan Doğan, and member of the Kurdish Youth Movement Leyla Shaylamez, were shot dead in Paris at the Kurdish institution. French police quickly arrested the Turkish 30 years Omar Guney, who was a member of the Kurdish Association in France. Surveillance footage placed him at the scene, and partial DNA from one of the victims was found on a parka belonging to him. The lawyer representing the families of the 3 Kurdish women murdered in Paris, Antoine Comté, stated to Farad News Agency about the investigation going on that there are many elements that indicate the responsibility of the Turkish state in this crime. According to the lawyer, Omar Guney, the prime suspect in killing of the 3 Kurdish women, is someone who has many links to the most radical Turkish groups. The lawyer added, in the Netherlands and Germany, where Omar Guney spent parts of his youth, there is at the moment an investigation being conducted. According to Antoine Comité, the whole investigation will be completed within a year. On his part, in a press conference, the Paris public prosecutor François Molins said that Omar Guney, who had been detained in connection with the killings of the 3 Kurdish women in Paris, was the prime suspect. Molins added that they had the security cameras of nearby stores and saw that Guney entered and left the association building twice, which coincides with the time of shooting. In one of his visits, Omar Guney photographed the membership forms of 360 people. On the other hand, Murat Şahin, a former member of the Turkish National Intelligence Organization living in Switzerland, said that Omar Guney is a member of the Turkish National Intelligence Organization, the MIT. 17th of December marked the 67th anniversary of the collapse of the Kurdish Republic of Mahabat, which was established in 1946 in eastern Kurdistan under the leadership of Qazi Muhammad. In less than a year, the first Kurdish Republic collapsed and its leaders were executed.
On the 20th of August 1941, the Soviet, British and American allied armies entered Iran. Reza Shah's dictatorship was replaced with a weak government based in Tehran and with no control over the south of the country, which was under the British and American occupation, and the north, which was occupied by the Soviet Union. The Mahabat area was occupied neither by Britain or America, nor by the Soviet Union. It was an area with a long tradition of Kurdish nationalism. In September 1942, seizing an exceptional favorable opportunity, the Kurds of Mahabat launched the first Kurdish political movement, the Komala. The democratic movement in Kurdistan soon outgrew the Komala structure. There was a need for an organization capable of leading tens of thousands of members. A new party was founded in 1945, the Kurdish Democratic Party, in which Qazi Muhammad played a large part in its foundation. The specific conditions of the times in both Kurdistan and Iran generally encouraged the democratic forces to go on the offensive. On 24th of January 1946, during a mass meeting attended by delegates from all the areas around Siqaz, the first Kurdish Republic was proclaimed and Qazi Muhammad, the leader of the KDP, was elected president. In keeping with the Tehran agreements, the Allied forces began to leave Iran and the Soviet forces moved out of the northern areas of the country a few months after the Anglo-American troops' departure. In 1946, the Tehran government launched a campaign to organize elections throughout the country. These elections required the presence of Iranian government troops in Kurdistan to supervise the proceedings. In December 17th, the Iranian troops entered Mahabat and the Kurdish movement collapsed almost without resistance. But the leaders of the republic, headed by Qazi Muhammad, remained on the spot. In late December, Qazi and several other republican leaders were arrested. In the early hours of March 23, 1947, Qazi Muhammad, his brother Sadr Qazi and his cousin Saif Qadar were hanged at dawn in the town center where the republic had been proclaimed just 10 months before.
According to the officials at the border crossing of Telkocher, the border crossing, which was liberated on 26 of October by People Defense Units and Women Defense Units, is open now to transfer aid to Rojava.
On October 23rd, the People Defense Units and Women Defense Units launched an offensive to liberate the strategic town of Telkocher al-Yarubiya and its border crossing. After 3 days of fighting with the Islamic State of Iraq and the Sham and other armed groups, on 26 of October, the town of Telkocher was liberated. Telkocher city, or Al-Yarubiya city in Arabic, is located in Rojava, 60 kilometers away from Derek city and 90 kilometers from Qamishlo city. Telkocher al-Yarubiya is the only border crossing between Rojava and Iraq and is known from the Iraqi side as Rabia crossing. The Islamic State al-Nusra Front and some battalions of the Free Syrian Army took control of Telkocher city on 21st of July 2012 from the Syrian regime. After the armed groups controlled Telkocher al-Yarubiya city, it turned to a main center for the armed groups to attack Rojava and its people. This prompted People Defense Unit Siepege and Women Defense Unit Siepege to launch an offensive to liberate the city. After fierce clashes between YPG and YPG fighters with the Islamic State and other armed groups, the Kurdish fighters took on October 26 the control of the city. Before leaving the Telkocher city and its border crossing, the armed groups have deliberately damaged the border crossing. Since the liberation, citizens of Telkocher started to rebuild their city from the damage done by the armed groups. In this order, city's municipality appointed a committee to renovate the damaged border crossing. After almost 2 months, the management of Telkocher border crossing declared the border crossing readiness to transfer humanitarian aid from Iraq to Rojava. Siamand Osman, a member of the Border Crossing Management, said in this regard that the gates of the crossing are open to any relief aid sent by any organization or institution to the displaced and needy families of Rojava. Osman added that two-day two trucks carrying relief aid from groups supporting Rojava from Slemaniye, southern Kurdistan city, have entered on 11 of December Rojava through Tulkocher. Large part of this aid was transferred to the Service Committee of Tulkocher city, which in their turn distributed it to the needy families. The Service Committee also distributed fuel to the town schools to protect children from the cold wave sweeping the region.
Let's move on now to the following news from Rojava.
The citizens of Ronahi and Mhatta neighborhoods of Sarikaniye city elected their representatives of neighborhoods people's councils. According to the supervising election committee, 94 people of Kurds, Arabs, Chechens and Christians origins have voted in the elections. In Sharra township of Afrin region, the Revolutionary Youth Movement held a meeting to discuss ways on how to support the Supreme Kurdish Council in order to resume its activities. Afterwards, the youth attended the meeting, launched a march through Sharra township streets, chanting slogans in support of the Supreme Kurdish Council. In Kobane city, in a ceremony, the Confederation of Patriots Kurdish students distributed 120 certificates to students who completed the Kurdish language and first aid courses. The Democratic Union Party held its first conference in the city of Sarikaniye with attendance of PYD's members of Sarikaniye and Tiltamer cities. The conference took the following decisions: organizing conferences for women and youth in all Rojava cities, strengthening relations between all components of Rojava. PYD's members will receive political and educational trainings. Seminars will be held about the Democratic Autonomous Administration. The Red Crescent in Aleppo's Kurdish neighborhood of Sheikh Maqsoud started a vaccination campaign for children which lasted 2 days. While the Red Crescent distributed in some neighborhoods of Qamishlo city wheelchairs to physically disabled people.
Robin Michael has written for the American Commentary magazine about US and PYD's relations and said it's time for the US to give PYD a seat at the table, while Balin Slanko has given 9 reasons why Kurds in Rojava are beating the Islamic State of Iraq and Asham.
Balin Slanko, who twice visited Rojava, has written for Syria Comment about the gains made by Kurds of Rojava and said Kurds has set up their own mini-state inside Syria, and the reason they are beating the Islamic State of Iraq and Asham are the followings. YPG has a unified command and control structures. YPG has a superior tactical skills and discipline. YPG has a wide popular backing and a powerful ideology. Rojava has a relatively open political system, a good road network and access to fuel. They have a safe and intact home front. Many of the factors mentioned above stem from the clever strategy in protecting and governing their own territories. In the American Commentary magazine, Michael Robin has written about Kerry's Salif defeat ahead of Syria conference. He went on saying, "The State Department claims that the PYD is pro-Assad. This is a misreading. The PYD has sought to be neutral in the conflict. That neutrality has meant keeping lines open to Assad, which is exactly what Kerry is doing at Geneva too. That Kerry and crew seek to ban the PYD demonstrates once again the administration's skewed values and strategic incompetence. It's time to give the PYD a seat at the table, according to Michael Robin." The English Daily Star has written about Kurds and Geneva conference and said, Syrian Kurds are demanding their own delegation, separate from both the government and opposition. The News Network and Broadcasting Collective International online newspaper published an article about the war declared by the Islamic State on Rojava and said, The Islamic State admitted that they had blocked roads around Aleppo in Syria and Kirkuk in southern Kurdistan and had kidnapped 25 Kurdish civilians who had given them Kurdish administration passports. While Ambreen Zaman has written for Al Monitor about Kurds and Geneva conference and entitled her article with Syrian Kurds jockey for seat at Geneva talks, she quoted PYD's co-chair Saleh Muslim that Geneva too represents an historic opportunity for Kurds to press for their long-suppressed rights. We will not allow Geneva too to become another Lausanne. On his part, Cengiz Cender has written also for Al Monitor about Kurds of Rojava and said the United States and Turkey need to change their approaches to the Syrian Kurdish Democratic Union Party PYD.
That's all for this week. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.